First, in order to receive these teachings properly, we should set our mind in the noble disposition of bodhicitta, thinking that we are studying, practicing Dharma in order to bring each and every sentient being throughout the infinity of space to utterly pure, most perfect and most precious enlightenment. In our study of Dharma, we are looking at this text called Pointing to the Dharmakaya, and within that text we've reached the section on deep insight meditation, vipassana.
doji palang rabu chibo ji yo na korong ko doji palang yinba ha ma go na di doji palang de be sho yo ba ma ri dang yo ba ma ri be de yang de rong ko san ge jela na da long tong de na da chi tong ji ge ni zi de na da de yo yo ba ri de yo ba de ta nga rong ko the in this practice, we are learning to discover how our mind is, how it functions. This is the actual heart, or what's called the actual practice of vipassana. It's the real core of it. And and this mind, what we're exploring is not something outside of us. What we are exploring is what is deeply within, its deep inner nature. And this really needs to be understood. If we can't understand this actual nature of our very own minds, its innermost nature, then the benefit will be very limited. We need to get that understanding, especially in terms of this practice. If we can't reach understanding, then there is no benefit that's attained. We could make an example for this. We could say it's as though somebody had a most precious diamond, but they don't know they have it. It's amongst their belongings, it's in the house where they live, but they have no idea that it's there. They've never come across it. And so even though it's the most precious diamond, it's of no benefit to the person at all because they don't know that it's there. Whatever we call it, this deep insight, vipassana, this nature of mind, this nature of all things, if it's not discovered, no matter how precious it is,
it's of no benefit to us.
다 가정이 결혼소 강가바래 라요바래 다 라라거 우니 다 산이데 가린 거디 강요지래 라라거 이게 노나 지요레디 강지 락사바래 강메 바래 다 대인들라나 배도 싫어미 바래 이게 노 저제다 놓고와도 지요 바래 니라지도 데 결혼서 강아니 결혼고 생각 뒤돌아 니리레가 재면나 데 결혼고 과 야부지러미 바래 데이나나 데니 눈이 강요나나 다 대조 생각하린다 오지 두 라리가 키워지리 라리가 다노 야부 키워지 말이 다 강면나 다 배도 공공 수고가 말이
Yesterday, Rinpoche gave us some meditation instruction and advice, and that was the first step in enabling the mind to become aware of itself, to examine itself, to see how it really is. Now, although how the mind is has been written about in texts by great masters, although we can read that, and we've probably read it, it's of no or little benefit to us, because unless we actually discover that directly for ourselves, then it just remains as words and ideas. It's the actual discovery by oneself, for oneself, in one's own mind, that makes all the difference. And the only way to discover is through actually doing the meditation practice. If we don't do the practice and do this exercise of actually discovering, then even if we've read the answers, even if we believe the answers, there won't be that much benefit at all. It's the actual first-hand discovery through meditation which makes all the difference.
다 희용캔거 다 니비센데 가린다고 진도 니비센데 가니 해서 가반로서 시 노츠드나 가송이 선다고 지기래 오야 니 대지 센데 하고송 더 가니 해서 가반로서 세노니 야포지데 하고송 So
if you remember, there was quite a bit of advice given for how to look at the mind. And the way we started yesterday in the first topic was looking at the mind when the mind is settled, focused in shamatha meditation. And although there was much advice, it boiled down to three things. First, how is that mind? Second, where did it come from? Third, where does it go to? How is it? How does it come about? How does it actually emerge? And when it's gone, how does it go? Where does it go to?
다 문이라고 지시에 찾잖아. 다 코로나 들어가래. 다 가리레디 니바디 세한테 지는디 가니 해서 가반로서 시 저바 동거래. 데 저바 동나 드니 코로나가 하고요나 드니 니바들라가 바래. 드니 하고메나 도노 코로나 강지 거래. 디 레데 다 알아서 저바고 드니 세나 뒤서 뒤면으로 바래. 야테이나 다 니바하고 차와시 레바하고 차와시 말에 드니로와 하고 차제를 또 차제를 세지제니 드니 니바다 다 차지래.
Now, if there was the opportunity to do this ideally, then this first stage of looking at the mind in shamatha, as we've seen, basically it's asking questions. It's not asking intellectual questions, but very quietly the mind is wondering, or is being aware of how it is, where it came from, where it goes. It's an investigation, it's a questioning, but not an intellectual questioning, a direct questioning on the spot. Now, this is actually supported in the ideal practice by a master to pupil questioning through a very precise series of questions, where first there's one question that's asked, and sorry, we were having a giggle. It's quite frustrating for people listening to talks. I know from my own experience. But when this happens on a one-to-one basis, it's quite interesting, amusing. It puts people on the spot. It's a very intense thing. On the basis of that one question, then the person has to find the answer. When the answer is clear, then, because they've understood that, you go on to the next question, and the next question. This is how the actual development happens.
Ronga de de pentu mere nga ma ju pandole si de de pentu mere pena ngaroso sonji khaja tabanda wo ju gona sonji yo ten de pentu mere sonji yi ten de pentu mere teni kare she gware jina sonji khaja tabade gulu kare inda wo ju naza kare inda wo ju to khako teni to gona teni muni da sonji gomara teni sonji yo, yudi yo, sonji yin, chaya de na, tani sonji karita uyo hako mire. Tenra wo ngaro, ta shosha chenpo gwanla yin se de na. Yin jire, ta ronsa yo de yin jire, konyo mara de zitali yin jire, chaya de na. Te pianto mire. Sonji chenpo hiyo pa mare. Te yin na ngaro so tsi re, tang re. Tani, tsi gnoni, mongpo song yo pare. 배나는 리 동보반이 다들 송지지 공부 토마송지 바다 지 광동 로동지의 야해 요 말이 디치들 로롱 되디나 롱을 패요 말이 롱가 마가나 롱가 녀모 바도 등아 통지 패도 요 말이 배나는 다 네바지가 니라 매몽보지 다 조론데 네 통지 매리 이제들이 이거 고로가 매도 하고 뭐히나 코로고 맞으나 디면도 그 접해도 요봐 봐라. 코로고 운이 다 내대도 또 내면도 수고하나? 되니 내들 패라. 되면 내가 민고니 패도 요봐 말이. 내가 모히니 패도 요봐 말이. 된다 우리 나로서 민고니 패도 메리. 당연히 맞으나? 운이 당롱고. 뭐나노? 내가 수나? 되니 내라 패리 된다 오지. 당 강니 당 희나? This
questioning, the questioning of the practitioner by the master is a vital thing. It's very real and it's indispensable. Thinking about the mind, knowing about the mind from books is of no use. The person has to actually meditate. They have to speak very honestly about what they've discovered, their experience, whatever it is, found, not found, like this, like that. And then the master, on the basis of what the person says, then needs to ask more questions. But you can only know what next questions to ask based on what the person has discovered or not discovered. It's a very organic, evolutive process. It's not just an order of questions out of a book that everyone does. It depends entirely on the answers, on the discovery of the practitioner. This is how it really happens. And there's no way that just words and ideas can substitute for that process. Not at all. For instance, I'm going to give a couple of examples. If we sit and we meditate on
before that he said, words and ideas are one thing, actually mastering the mind, binding the mind is another thing. Doing it in reality is very different from knowing about it or thinking about it. So to give an example, if we meditate on Buddha Shakyamuni, then people can just sit and you say, okay, meditate on the Buddha. So we have a vague sort of idea of the Buddha, some vague image. And it's not really meditating on the Buddha, it's dwelling in some vague abstraction of the Buddha. To really do it properly, then we need to study the details of how are the Buddha's eyes, how is the Buddha's shape of the body, what are the robes, how do they hang, every little detail. Then afterwards, when we meditate on the Buddha, there's a very, very precise image of Buddha Shakyamuni. Then it becomes visualizing the Buddha with all of its benefits, the 32 marks and so on. Otherwise, you're just resting in a vague abstraction of the Buddha, meditating on the Buddha. It's not a precise meditation. To give another example of medicines, if we know the names of hundreds of medicines and what diseases they treat, we know the names of hundreds of medicines and what diseases they treat, but it's not actually benefiting our body one bit, just knowing the names. If we need to know how sick we are, what sickness it is, to actually take the medicine that corresponds to that sickness, then there's some benefit. Otherwise you can know the names of thousands of medicines, you won't be any the healthier for it. So when it comes to this meditation, we need to actually ourselves discover our mind, not through words and books, but through the direct experience, the vivid experience of the mind, through ourselves questioning how it is, and through this being stimulated by the teacher putting us on the spot through questions to which we have to find answers, and then on the basis of that, developing it. Yes, sir.
미바 나요레지 미바도 동보서바레 다 더노 더 해차치 제거바레 따라 더노 손노 동도 끼고바레 다 가레레라나 다 미바도 하공케세레 동보 미바고 선 미바 고시거바라 미바 고마히나 미바 쳐마라 다 미바 고신케도 서레지 미바 코로 고히레 니바 많이 바지 그게 안 오시 오래. 배나 가롱소 그 머신 통거나 가롱 통문 간고. 가롱거 파통 통하라. 뭐 가린다 오지. 된다고 니바 코롱 가리가리서 하고 오디. 우니 코롱 통도. 배나 가롱 온 통마라. 배 된다고 니바 코롱 가리서 하고 오디. 영원아 니바 모신케지 로크 생진도 다케지 고 니바레 텐케지 되니 요나 되니 생니라고 쳐로 다케지도 다사지 오나 메나 되니 코로 가리조 코로 통리 기타 메반다고 코로 가리존 통거나 코로 찔리존 통으래 배나 코너 세니반다고 이나 다 코로 찔리존 통으래 단다 통거나 연바지거나 진통 추슈라고 진도야 연바지 비거나 파티나 콘통도야 되니 더 많이 봐 오냐 니바 코로 이나 코로 찔리존 통도 요메나 단게 로직인도 디 가리진도
When it comes to the mind which is at rest, then what we're doing with all these different details of questions, what we're doing is coming to recognize that mind. Or if we put it a bit more accurately, what is happening
is that a recognition of that mind is occurring. That mind is being recognized. If there is no recognizing, in other words, there's the mind of shamatha. There's this peaceful, focused mind. That's the basis. And then something is aware of that. Something recognizes peaceful, focused mind. Something is aware of it, something recognizes it. If there isn't that awareness, then we can't even talk about a peaceful, focused mind. Nothing knows it. What's there to talk about? So then, when there is, as we go through this investigation, some awareness of the mind which is settled, then we have some questions to ask. First, is that settled mind, that peaceful mind, is it something that knows itself? Is the awareness of itself part of that peaceful mind? That's one possibility. We need to actually, on the spot, discover if that's the case or not. Or are there two things? One is the settled mind, peaceful shamatha, and the other is an awareness. It's an intelligence which knows that peaceful mind. Is that the case? And if that's the case, then are there two minds? In that moment, is there a mind which is at peace, one, and then at the same time a mind which is aware of that peace, two? Another thing we have to discover on the spot. If there isn't an awareness which is separate, then it brings us back to the first point, is there simply an auto-awareness that's part of the settled, focused mind? These are the sort of questions we have to discover about the relationship between the awareness or the intelligence that's knowing it and what is being known. So are there two things, like Rinpoche's two hands, where Rinpoche's left hand is the peaceful shamatha, and Rinpoche's right hand is the awareness which knows it? Is there sort of an awareness standing in front or quite close to the peaceful shamatha that knows it? Is it like two things? If it's like that, then this makes two minds. If it's not, if there aren't the two, if they're not two distinct things, then there's one. If there's only one thing, then it's either a settled mind, in which case there's no awareness, or if there is awareness, intelligence, that's not the same as a settled mind. So if there's only one thing, there's awareness, but there's no settled mind. Is that the case? There's just one of those two, or if not, are there two?
Penana, Ninken, Hakona, Hakode Hina, don't Nipa Mari, Hakode, Sand. Tony, Nipa Koron, no, Hamagona, Nipa Yamba, Himudi. Ronana, Hipa Nion the Ogudu. Homena Gina, Nipa Ina, Nipa Inji the Hako Gamundi. Hako Gan Mena, Nipa Yon Hakomudi. The Inana, that's a new Ganan, the young Madidis. Chi Ganania. The Nipa Yona, Hako Gamundi, Hako Gayona, Nipa Mandi. Talana, Gajigni.
So this is what we have to meditate on. Rinpoche is going through it once again, so it's very clear, is if, because we've had the experience of absorption, of just a settled focused mind, we know that's an experience possible, but then if there's an awareness of that focused, settled mind, it's not the same as just a focused, settled mind. There's an awareness of it as well. So are they two things, as he explained? One mind observing another mind? And if it's just one thing, then awareness is one thing, being intelligent, sort of asking the question without putting big words in the mind, but just this very fact of a questioning, aware, alert intelligence is one thing. That's not the same as simple, absorbed, peaceful mind, is it? If there's just one thing, it has to be either absorbed, peaceful mind or intelligence. If not, then there has to be a twofold mind. This is something we don't need to answer intellectually. This is what we have to then take into our meditation, observe it as it's happening, as there's a shamatha, as there's awareness, as there's a questioning of how is this settled mind, as we did yesterday, then we have to examine whether it's two or one.
가송이 가릴라리지나 교로서 니바 뛰고 라리 니바의 간이 해수 뛰고 라리 가란 로드 뛰고 라리 다 교로서 따가노샤 뭐지 단도 공공요지 뭐지 살아가요지 말이 다 가리 교로서 하고리 다나 뛰고 라디 때라 다 nga로 기타디 때라 거 니바 가린드 간이 해고인드 가란 로드 교로서 뛰요지 다 따디 때라나 다 따제 그 여지 당캔 시바지 대 요거 봐라 성진도 쳐도리 따뜻면나 배나너 니 나뉴가나 괜찮다고 쳐라 기대면이나 시바지 되면이나 배나 나롱다고지 뭔다고지 시바지 되면이나 당이 뉴클라 말이 니밭 기대면이라 니밭 기대면이나 다 니바도 뛰고라 말이 가린다고 주디 따그리 세나 가린다고 따가라 따효라도 니바 기디메메나 다 뛰고라도 딜 카토아가 따히오레다 가린디우세 따히오레 알았어 되니 다 따지기 당겨야지 니라고지 요 공두 또 메나 니바 코롱 그티나 베나 난다고지 니반다고지나 너희 나따가나 괜찮다고 지요라. 니가 뉴나? 오. 가만히 니 아마 잡아도 가만히 가로 뛰나? 대. 배 괜찮다고 지. 넘어라고 말해. 어야. 대대이디 니 파티 뉴나? 괜찮다고 진디야. 대대면하나? 지 뉴지요나? 니 요거도야. 근데 니요나? 세 니로 쳐온도야. So
yesterday Rinpoche gave us these instructions, which is for the afternoon, for the evening, in between the sessions, to go back, to settle the mind, and then to be aware of that settled mind, to ask ourselves the questions: how is this? Is it inside, outside, habakal? All these questions. How is it? How did it emerge, this peacefulness? And when it's lost, how does it go? Where does it go? These were the questions we were asking ourselves. He says he doesn't know what happened in each of your meditations, but that was the practice that was given. So that means that since yesterday's session until today, you must have had some experience of being aware of the shamatha in your practice. That should be the case. So yesterday's job was actually being aware of the shamatha, where does it come from, how is it, and so on. Now we're taking that one step further. Now that you've had the experience of being aware of the shamatha, then there are these questions that we go over again to make it very clear that Rinpoche is just bringing out. If there's now not just shamatha, settled mind, but this introduction of awareness of the settled mind, questioning, then does this make one or two minds? If the shamatha, peaceful mind, has somehow come to know itself, become aware of itself, if we think that's the answer, not think, but when we actually come to do this practice now, if that's emerging, it's a bit strange, isn't it? Rinpoche says, he always uses this example where he talks about this fat lama. So he says, if this fat lama is going around looking for itself or understanding yourself is a very strange thing. You can look at other people, but actually knowing yourself, examining yourself, is the shamatha, peaceful settled mind. Knowing itself, well, that could be. So this is one thing we have to look into. If not, if the awareness is something other, then this makes two minds, or a double-faceted mind with two distinct things. Is that the case? This is what we need to determine next through our meditation practice. We really have to find it. What's going on here? What's going on with this mind which is, quiet and then calmly aware of, where's this quietness coming from, so on? Are there two minds? Is there one mind? If there's no awareness, knowing that you're meditating, then what's happening? What's your meditation? If you don't know you're meditating, what does meditating mean?
to gawan ros ta ti nyu du ke tan du ke da gari ri tan ke da sei to ge na wi so.
So this now brings us to four main aspects for the settled mind. The three that we've had up until now. What is it like? Where does it come from? And how does it come? And third, where does it go to? How does it go? And now the fourth one is the awareness of the shamatha, something that's part of the shamatha, separate from the shamatha, so that there are two things, as was just elaborated. This is the fourth step, is to understand the relationship between the awareness and the shamatha.
Ta ya po ma hina ni pa gon khile mare ndo na kare dine ni je kare ha ko mo dia ta ya po chi hidu deni uni ta ni pa gon khile re 디 히메나 디 니파 강실마 다 고롱로사 데데지리 다 니파 이 소로사 데데지리 더 팬도 쳐보 요바 말에 히니 좀 로 선나 히레 말이 가서 라이야 마도 운이 가로서 샤제 첨부 건로도 히오바 말에 데데지 다티 니파도 운이 드리도 따고다요 다게 세니 다 니파도 드린 거 선지키도 다 원초나 되니 샤제 첨부 노니 니파도 되니 샤제 첨부 쳤들리
So one needs to master those 4 points. They need to come to some conclusion in order for our calm mind, our shamatha mind, to be known. If it's not known, then it's simply shamatha. It's simply a peaceful mind. And in yesterday's talk, many times it was mentioned, simply a peaceful mind is of very limited benefit. It's something that's not necessarily even a Buddhist thing. It's done outside of Buddhism. It can lead to long rebirths in other states and so on. It's simply a peaceful, settled mind. So this peaceful, settled mind that knows what it is, that is understood through wisdom or awareness, this is something very different, and this is the first step that absolutely needs to be mastered. It's this awareness of what a peaceful, settled mind is through those 4 great questionings that then will bring us into the profound practice of insight, will take us on the path to liberation, and then this is the beginning of real Mahamudra. If we can successfully complete those 4 investigations, then we'll have mastered Mahamudra as far as the peaceful mind is concerned.
Tani jimala tanga ni pa karise gele nga ni pa chindire seong to ba se ga mare yana trawa traga mare muni ta koro ya bu hitana mena ta ronga ni pa inokya pa gon teni se de ni pa kwa ro mare ni pa ya bu ko mena tani 샤제 첨부 기천나 더리 니천나 더리 산천나 더리 아마 번로디 메레 고로 고메레 고메나 샤제 첨부 len 자천나 니도 자서 len 자 뭐 추근도 len 자 뭐 라마 자타 막 천나 제파라 그래 뭐야 가르시나는 너 검제 그래 생각티도니 과로 그래 생각티도 로조시 그래 되인디들라 생각티도 로조시들라 우스드잘레 다들 로조시 그래 나 알아서 이게 식무포로 로종세나 무포 코로레 레조 하고 그도와 배는 디자런다고 지 무포신 거지도 코로레 레조 찾아글리 레레 제 텐디시고 가서 하고 그도면 롱가면 코로피 리즈 가가디 디 눈으로 mond이야 디 생각티도 녀란세 생각티도 로종세 뭐그 돈도 메라 라보라 되나 생각티도라 레레시 손도 동거도 되나 다 니바다 손도 동지가 니게야 So
really and truly this is something that we have to do. It has to be done. There is no other way than by doing the practice assiduously until the answers emerge in crystal clarity in our own mind. There's no other way than that. And we could do 100 times, we could go through a Mahamudra course such as the Ocean of Certainty. 100 times we could go through a course such as this on pointing out the Dharmakaya. And if we just leave it vague, if we have some vague notion of, in this case, the shamatha mind, how is it? Something based on what we read in books or a bit of experience we've had but not much, then we'll never change. We can go to 100 courses, 100 of these courses, or the other courses. We could meditate with 100 brilliant masters and take Mahamudra teachings, but unless and until we actually do that work ourselves and go through it and let the mind be aware of itself until the answer is absolutely recognized, clear as crystal, no doubt about it, then there'll be no progress. This is so true. There's no other way than by the practice.
Tani shisha gajapala dombo lantong gang tani hini gzhou xie ji tri lu su ji yo bare tani dombo hini gang tani lantong gang tani xie ga yo bare manda ba yo bare.
Actually, in the Kagyu tradition, there is not a definite order in learning shamatha and vipassana. It depends on the person. For some people, we actually start with vipassana, and then on the basis of the insight, the vipassana, the deep insight, then afterwards they need to refine their shamatha to build that up as a support for their development. For other people, they need to start with the shamatha and build that up bit by bit, and then the insight comes along on that basis afterwards.
Tani ta karin rawo chire la na dombo lantong gam tani hini gamzi da hini ga duso dami ba mo chi ro yo bare ombo yora chi na ombo rala doni ko hini lantong gam tani che ga du ha ko ro yo bare se ngo ro yo bare tani na hini ta ta dami mo chi da duso ro mo ro re tani na doni te kala lantong ngote lantong teni ta hini ga zhou xie ta hini la na ta xian zu ni xia la guo ra du ji le di lantong de ngo xiong ji de ta ta la hini ji mi dao yo ba re ya ni ma hini ng ga ru su guang tong da wo ma re di ge ji dou lantong ngo de da ding yin zhen jian nan da ni par xie ba la dian ni ta la na ta hini ji mi dao ya ne ji ji teni xie gang yo ba re zhe die zu ji da wong bo 용라 통지라 다 든디 세디디란 계속 돌아로 기어봐 말이 든디 좀로 기어봐.
What's the reason for this? Well, when the vipassana comes first, when the insight comes first, this is the case for those of best faculties, very gifted or very, let's say, ready disciples, practices. And so in that case, because of their readiness, the way their mind is, then it's quite possible for the teacher to point out, to help them discover, to recognize the nature of their mind very quickly. And it will be a waste of their time to make them labor through shamatha meditation, because actually developing mental quiescence, peacefulness, can take a long time, because of the nature of the work that needs to be done with thoughts and emotions. And it's possible that someone who is the finest or the most prepared of people, that the pointing out comes first, and then after that, it needs the development of shamatha, because shamatha does its own work. It's a very, very vital support, a useful support for the insight and for further work on the mind. So then the shamatha training comes second. Even though that's the case, we can't really call it just shamatha anymore. It's not just like raw shamatha that we do as beginners, because that shamatha is being done with the accompaniment of the insight that came through the pointing out and so on. So that means it's not the same as shamatha that we do in the dark without understanding the nature of mind.
Hira chua ombo membala, lantong teka ngote na, pentu yo ba mari, lantong ngonto yo ba mari, san tie zoji, ma ni xia zha yo, tie zoji san ya pu ji re ma se na, lantong ngote to yo ba mari, pentu yo ba mari. Da da ba la, dombo hini ya bu gong je, teni ka le zo lantong ngote yo ba ri. Teni du la, da yong, da song ji jiang den di, da ja la den ni chu dian yo ba ri. Ma tu, korong ga kari gong na, de xie wa, ma ri, then ore gaji pio moya la la hini tombo ten la long tombo ten ta teni sedi la ti deja tala sono tondo teni zo hi bare.
If we come to whatever the word is, the medium or the average practicer, the normal practicer, then if there was a pointing out, if that could happen, in theory, but it can't. If it were given at first, if one went through the procedure, it wouldn't have any benefit. The mind's nature couldn't be recognized because that mind is not ready. It's also too busy. It's too unsettled. So even if the procedure would be gone through by a master, it wouldn't hit home, it wouldn't produce its results because the mind isn't ready. And so, to make the mind ready, then first there's some training in shamatha, so the mind becomes settled, it finds some peace, and then, whenever the time's right, then the master can give the pointing out and proceed on from there. The Buddha's teaching is famous for being something that's very vast and varied and can be adapted to the needs of each individual. And so in our Kagyu tradition, as far as the teachings of the Mahamudra goes, then this is the way it's done, depending on the capacities, the way the person's mind works, then which comes first can be adapted to suit. That, what Rinpoche has explained, gives us some idea of what's happening in the first of these main objectives of developing insight, which is using the settled mind.
Sen gong ya puji jo sen sang no ya puji ma dong na ci go ji pe tu yo ba ma re sen la sang no ya puji dong na de nga da ni mi ba nga yo re la ra de nga ga ya pu ji de gwa ro na de ni choro so ga re gong na pe mi ji gong la bu cho ba re gong hi de yo ba re gong la bu cho ba re ka li yo ba ma re pe na da ta ni ba hi ne na ni ba go ro sa gong yi de de pe tu me ra teni nipa de yapo chaka kosa de la no teni rongla ichi le wara o nipa ta nguni ta ndri jindia so seno la ichi da wuji zhuan da wuji yapo le wara tam hako mena zhuan da wuji da womara ta rongsa ta ko injire te de ra de ta teni ichi da wuji do nongla zhuan da yapo ji womara de teni de la na de ngala na seno ni so no do hoya songji ge song no de di song ge la ma ho ho kama pi de di song ge la ma ho lama ji ge de di song ge la ma ho ta ta songji do songji sen ba kama ba do lama no ko are de ma ro ko ma re ma ro ko wa de ma ro ge sen ni ho ge de nana ma ro so gang ji de ma ro ge sen de de nyo nyo do ho ge are de me kama pa to songji no do sha o mare he do mare te mi yo ji mare songji do songji sen ba te o yo mare te ji nga ro ne me ro mo dia pe ma dia songji le do sha o mare he do mare te mi yo ba mare nga ro ko ha ko are ta yo mare nga ro so no ba songji bi la re te nga songji nda wo chwa de te yo ji hi yo ji nga do sha me ro mo dia he do me ro mo dia te me na le la bo re te nga ro ko gam je de me le thang ge dia ten da wo re 우선 강제동 다자 소시한도 되는 뭐 벌써 오래돼 특히지 배도면도 나 배하면도 되나 나로 그 생각 뒤도 니 던다고 지래 그래야 달라에 선호야 보지 또
Rinpoche would like to stress again points he's already made, but is stressing them because they are just so important that we really need to take them to heart. We are looking here at 5 ways of recognizing the mind, the first of which was in shamatha. And when we do these practices, then whatever words there are about mind, about Mahamudra, about voidness, whatever it may be, are of zero use. They're of no use at all to us when we do this. If we actually do the practice step by step and give it all the time and attention and value that it needs to have, then this will be a wonderful thing indeed. it will make all of the rest of our practice clear, understood, and it will give us a great joy in practice. For instance, shamatha meditation is laborious. It's a lot of long, hard work. If we do what's been being described in this last 24 hours, and we have this wisdom of shamatha as it's happening, we develop that through our own painstaking direct investigation, then we'll understand shamatha. There'll be such a joy in doing shamatha because we'll understand our mind, we'll understand why shamatha is there, what it's doing. It will make our practice incredibly easier. It liberates Dharma practice if we can do this. And on top of that, it gives us such confidence because we're not practicing Buddhism in the dark, in the hope. We actually understand the mind and what it is we're doing and why it is we're doing it. It gives us tremendous confidence in the practice. There's so many benefits that come out of doing it. So it's no use leaving this vague, some vague mixture of a tiny bit of meditation plus something we read in the books, and we think that somehow with that combination there's the answer. There isn't. What was in the books, as Rinpoche said, this is what the Buddha discovered. It's what the Karmapa discovered and told us. It's what the great gurus of the lineage discovered and told us. That's their realization they're telling us about. It's not us. They were immaculately pure beings. Buddha didn't have any desire. Buddha didn't have any anger, didn't have any pride or aggression. None of these things, neither did the Karmapa. In those wonderful minds free from those things, they could tell us about what they discovered about the mind. Now, our minds aren't quite like that. So we have to work with the actual working material we have. We have to work with who we are, with what we are. It has to be very real. Listening to what they discovered is not going to change us. It doesn't have that much benefit. We have to find what they discovered within ourselves through this, using our own mind and going very thoroughly, very professionally through the work. There was something Rinpoche said earlier on, I forgot, in one of the earlier bits of the talk. He said, look, in the world we know how so many things work. Otherwise we're handicapped in the world. We know objects, we know how to do this, how to do that, how this functions, how to fix that. We know so much out there. But as far as our own minds go, we don't have the knowledge. So please think about these things.
ni mara ta ni men dira sanan jawa ji theni ji no tu chi kha ba re ta di no tu to gari na ju ta ga ba re ta di no tu to ta tong to gari se ta ga ba re la na kha song ni pa ta tong chi hie ya ta tong da bo re ta jin jian ro de di nje je ge san de gari da wo jin du dong bo ko rong la dan du yong ma nje je ge san de pe na ta nga dong bo san ta san la ne ta ni pa ji xie ni pa da wo ji wo ra di ji se la ta nga san la ne pe na la ma zhe ge ge chi rong ge la ma de zhe ge ge chi ta di la ma zhe je de san de la ma ho nyong ji ge san de ka ren da wo jin du ye ndu song ye ma du ka du ndu song ka du ma du ya la ma pe na ne gong bo de ji wo na xa gong bo de wo ji yo na di xa gong bo de wo de ngu ni ye re so ka du re di ye ka du de ta na rong ge san ge xie ge ndu su xie ma du 자공보라고 전해지다. 아마 자바라고 지원다. 다 자바라고도 하지다. 이래서 가도리. 또 생각시에서 생각시에 말이. 다리라고 인도. 다거든.
Now, the second of the 5 areas is an investigation or an awareness of the active mind. This is the changing active mind. So, first we need to start from peacefulness. So we sit down, start our session, and enter into the peacefulness, the shamatha. And Rinpoche says, I have no idea how your shamatha is, how easy that is or whatever, but anyway, we start with the mind being settled, and then, within that peaceful focus, then we develop a thought. We can think of a friend, man, woman, person we know, and use that as a thought. And then, now that the mind is not just very peaceful, with nothing happening, but now something is happening, there's an image, a thought in the mind, then again, very, very similar to yesterday's technique, we try to raise an awareness of it as it's happening, not to ask intellectual questions, not to be discursive about it and think about the thought, but just as that thought is happening, to be aware, how is this? Where's it coming from? Where's it going? But how is it? Does this thought have shape and colour? Does the mind which is thinking have shape and colour? For instance, if we take as an object of our thought a guru, then a teacher. So then if that teacher is a very thin teacher, for instance, as we raise the thought of a thin teacher in the mind, is the mind which is now thinking about a thin teacher, imaging a thin teacher, has the mind shrunk in itself? We're looking at the mind itself that's holding the image. And then if you think of a fat teacher, does the mind swell out and become fatter to make a fat teacher or not? So as we go, there's the actual image, which is the mind is, or the thought that the mind has, but then the mind that's thinking that, does that mind itself have shape or colour? Is it getting fatter and thinner? Is it changed the mind itself changing colour? Is the mind changing shape or not? This is what we have to look into with the moving mind.
Tati nipa inanda, njaba inanda. Tata yukari gari lana. Sang titulo matugo. Kaso nipa inayon. Pena ngaroso deganda wala. Sang nipa she. Sheji nipa jua. Tin nipa de mare. Tin nipa la sono tonya mandu tata. Tati takali kabo yore. Tata ganji to. Tamaya san no la ta no tu kare moncho wa khini zo ta kare ina jin du ju ra san ga ti tu ni ba ya dol so no dong ji le ka so ni ba de de ma wo de ga la wo do xin u po la ta kan ra ra do ji ro yo ji de mi ba ti ni ba de ma re ti ni ba de de to kali kha bo yo re kali ma she ga ba re kali kha ba de ma she ga na pe na ka ka nga ra ma zo wa ye pha te ka lu ga na le la bo ma re den ra wo do bo nga ro so 이게 리리리리 시에도 되는 생각 논이 써놓도나 리라고 쳐바래. 뭐 식무포라 써놓도나 깔리카고 요래. 다다 다잘라히오 봐 말이. 배나 무슨 인저한다고 지나요. 다 동본더 다 딩가 만들었다 이거는 생겨봐 티봐라. 딩져봐도 말이. 생각 뒤돌아 전적은 져봐들이. 내가 비수 라마 세지도 배나 라마라고 지다 무포를 팔다 딩져봐도도 말이. 이거지도 생각 뒤돌아는 인제반도 니바 마인 바지 너나 너도 초지니 디세고데 카츠와다 다다 소노 동지더라 모두 생각도困难이 소노 동지 동보.
One thing that needs to be perhaps clarified, and it's a fraction more subtle in some ways, is that whether it's the practices that were described yesterday for the settled mind, or what we're just starting now for the moving mind, the active mind, then this is the mind becoming aware of itself. It's the mind that we're interested in. So yesterday, when we're dealing with shamatha, in the actual ABC of shamatha, when we're learning shamatha, then we use an object like a pebble or a stone or the breath or a Buddha statue and so on as a way of developing shamatha. We're not concerned when we do this investigation, we're not looking into pebbles and stones and Buddha statues, whatever the support is for the shamatha. We're actually looking at the peaceful mind itself. Once we've used the support and the mind is settled, the mind is stable, then that stable, peaceful mind that's been acquired through using a support or whatever, once we're in a state of peacefulness, it's the peaceful mind which is aware of itself. We're not trying to be peacefully aware of a pebble, peacefully aware of a Buddha statue. It's the actual settled mind in yesterday's exercises that's saying, where did this settledness, this settled mind come from, go to? How is it? It's the same today. When we talk about the moving mind, we're not, for instance, sitting and looking around the place we're meditating in, so our mind is jumping, our visual awareness is jumping from one thing to another. We're not externalized for this practice. We're not actually going to go to a place where there's a fat lama and a thin lama and look at the one and look at the other and see what the difference is with the mind. Here we're looking at the mind itself. So now, when that mind is peaceful, settled in shamatha, then we go on from there to make that peaceful mind move by raising a thought, an idea within it, as was just explained, the idea of a thin teacher or a fat teacher. And then it's this mind which is now moving, that's slightly busy, thinking, holding an image, that's the subject of our awareness, that's asking, how is it, where does it come from, where does it go? Where did it go?
njava ka nipa to jenanda njava korong ngo ta ji to ta ta de ta ti njava to yong nipa ndo gari zo ti njava de le aro se ji ko sen se da ti nje ji ga ra ti ti nje ji ro di ti gari zo ko pa njava cho ko njava ji pa cho ga ma ti njava de gari zo cho ya rong go nje ji me na 까깔이나 너도 롱 이제 맞잖아. 롱 그거 이제 봐 쳐는 봐라. 롱 이제 잖아. 롱 거 봐. 이제 쳐 봐라. 이제 찌르티라. 가래서 봐 이제 찌지. 다리 제이. 내가로 잘라온다 오지나 봐. 니린다고 세거나 그 롱 리라. 리들라 가리 세지. 던다 오지. 봐 이제들라. 가래서 봐 이제 찌. 야, 롱 이제 찌지 많이 봐지도 너도 찌도 그런 게 와서나 얘나가로 세 이파시 인디디디라나 너도 진짜 건져도 돼와 다 든디다고 지나 롱 이제 마치시라 문이 롱 마치시라 그로 롱게 건져 와라 롱게 건져 온데 그 가리도 그 롱게 건져서 다 인하고 진도야 지드지 롱게 파지가지 문이 동보대 조진데니 대피 너도 시기가 말이 더 롱거 시라. 티 롱거 시디티 가래서 코파 앉았어. 까깔아 롱거 맞이 봐. 그럼 나로서 니 파티도 되는 데 맞지도 나도 레고도 왔다 롱거 맞이 시라. 또 레고도 그 가래서 레서. 디 이제와 달라 야부치 동동도
As the mind becomes aware of its movements, there's this investigation of the active mind, the moving mind, then what we're being aware of is how does it emerge. So first we're doing that with a thought or an idea that we have actually fabricated. First there is shamatha, and then we create the idea of a person or whatever it is. And so then we're very aware, as this is happening, of how that peaceful mind, settled, is made active. And we're trying to be aware of what is the transformation, if any, what is lost, what comes out, how does it come out, what changes from one thing to the next. We're just trying to be very aware of the process to see how peacefulness becomes busyness. And then there's a second way, is that sometimes the mind is peaceful, and without us making the effort, without us actually deliberately making a thought,